Hi, everyone. We have breaking news tonight. A big ruling in the Trump document case. In what many in the legal world will call another surprising ruling, a federal judge has just denied the Department of Justice motion to allow investigators to resume using those classified documents seized from Mar-a-Lago as part of a criminal investigation. So for now, the DOJ has to wait until what is called a special master reviews those documents, and that could take time. Judge Aileen Cannon also appointed Raymond Dearie, a senior U.S. District Judge for the Eastern District of New York, as that special master in charge of reviewing all the documents for issues of what are called privilege. Both the DOJ and Trump team had agreed on Dearie as a possible candidate. In her filing denying the DOJ's motion, Judge Cannon, who was appointed by President Trump in his final days in office, writes, quote, "The record suggests ongoing factual and legal disputes as to precisely which materials constitute personal property and or privileged materials. And there are documented instances giving rise to concerns about the government's ability to properly categorize and screen materials." That's quite a rebuke. Yes, it's true that there are personal records and other personal items of Donald Trump's mixed in with the classified documents that were seized. That is apparently how those documents were being stored. But read that carefully. The judge is saying that she simply does not trust the government to do what they do in just about every other case: separate out these kinds of documents themselves. The judge also tried to emphasize that this should not mean, in her view, that they have to stop their criminal investigation altogether. Quote, "The September 5th order," meaning her earlier order, "does not restrict the government from conducting investigations or bringing charges based on anything other than the actual content of the seized materials, from questioning witnesses and obtaining other information about the movement and storage of seized materials, including documents marked as classified, without discussion of their content." The problem with that is what is in the documents does matter, and not discussing the contents will make that very difficult. The judge also disputes the government's claim that it cannot assess the intelligence damage, which the judge said they are allowed to do for now, without also being able to use the documents in the criminal investigation. The judge writes, first, "There has been no actual suggestion by the government of any identifiable emergency or imminent disclosure of classified information arising from plaintiffs' allegedly unlawful retention of the seized property. Instead, and unfortunately, the unwarranted disclosures that float in the background have been leaks to the media after the underlying seizure." Again, this judge is pointing the finger at the FBI here for leaking details of what's inside the documents. Now, look, this could just mean a delay. But I and many others expected that she would revise her opinion to allow the government to access just the classified documents that belong to the government, not to Donald Trump. Her decision, according to just about every legal expert, rests on pretty weak legal grounds on that front. And she really didn't address those problems in tonight's order. Her ruling suggests that somehow a former president may be able to invoke executive privilege over highly classified records that are the property of the government, which includes the Justice Department. Now, the DOJ has said that if the judge did not stay her order, pausing the investigation by tonight, they would appeal to the Court of Appeals in the 11th Circuit, which is a conservative court, 6 of its 11 active judges appointed by President Trump. But presumably that is their next move. Joining me now is Jay Town, former U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Alabama, appointed under President Trump, and David Maria, former federal prosecutor as well. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming on the program. Jay, let me start with you. Are you surprised by the judge's ruling that has just come out?
Am I surprised that Judge Cannon didn't overrule her order of 10 days ago? No, Dan, I'm not. And you know, I thought that perhaps she would maybe give some access to those 100 records or so, those classified records to DOJ. And maybe if there needed to be some judicial process, have some in-camera review. But I'm not surprised at all that she didn't overrule herself tonight. And in fact, she, as you pointed out in the lead-in, she took a number of shots at the Department of Justice and sort of how they've conducted their business since the search at Mar-a-Lago.
But it seems to me, David Maria, that if you're going to take that position, then she's got to take that position against the government in just about every case, right? And say the government just shouldn't be in the business of doing the separating of the documents. You surprised at all by the ruling?
I mean, I thought the government put together a pretty compelling case as to why those 100 or so documents marked as classified should be excluded and, and stayed with regard to those. So, I mean, I thought there was a decent chance she might change that. As to appointing the special master, no, she indicated from day one she wanted to do that.
Right. Yeah, look, let me be clear. This ruling about the special master, and this is the reason I'm not spending a lot of time on this, it seems that the parties have agreed, right? Seems like they've got a very qualified special master there in Raymond Dearie, for a federal judge. The Trump team suggested him. The Department of Justice agreed to him. Fine. He's going to be the guy who's now going to be looking at the documents to determine if there's, for example, attorney-client privilege. But the question tonight was, can the government resume its investigation of those documents, using those documents? And the answer tonight is no. And I think, and let me play the sound from Bill Barr. I mean, even Bill Barr, the former attorney general, insists that the judge's ruling on this was wrong.
The opinion, I think, was wrong, and I think the government should appeal it. It's deeply flawed in a number of ways. I don't think the appointment of a special master is going to hold up, but even if it does, I don't see it fundamentally changing the trajectory. In other words, I don't think it changes the ball game so much as maybe we'll have a rain delay for a couple of innings.
Do you think the special master will be overturned on appeal by the DOJ?
I think if DOJ appeals eventually, it'll be overturned.
How long will that take?
Well, that's why it could be delayed. I hope they expedite it, but it could take several months to get that straightened out.
All right, so you're shaking your head there, Jay. Why?
Well, okay, so if you're the Department of Justice and you're anxious to get going on this criminal investigation, and the appeal is going to take 60 to 120 days, and the special master is going to be done in 75, what good is it to then cause all these appellate delays when you're actually going to be able to start your investigation back up sooner? I don't disagree with General Barr's sort of summation that there is sort of a rain delay, as he said, in the appeal, and whether or not there's a charge down the road, I don't think this changes any of that. Right. And I'm on the record saying that I think that raiding Mar-a-Lago was step 20 in a 20-step process, and I do think that the former president will be charged with something. Not that I want that to happen. It's just my experience is informing me of that sort of hunch. But I don't think appealing it is a good strategy for the Department of Justice. And don't forget, there's a lot of things here that the 11th Circuit could also rule on after Judge Cannon makes her decisions after the special master is done.
We are talking about the breaking news that has just come up in the last hour or so, that the judge who is now the federal judge who is overseeing at least a part of the Mar-a-Lago documents case has ruled that the Department of Justice still can't use those classified documents seized at Mar-a-Lago as part of its criminal investigation. David Maria, what did you make of the judge's argument basically dismissing the government, which had said, look, you said to us, Judge, that we could use these documents to assess any national intelligence damage. But the government said, look, we can't do that without also being able to use these documents as part of the criminal investigation. I thought that was one of the weaker arguments by the government, and the judge in this case smacked it down.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. They had to make a case that it was inextricably intertwined, that the national security review couldn't be parsed away from the criminal investigation, and she clearly didn't buy that argument. So, and that was clear in her opinion. I think the reason why the DOJ is going to appeal this, though, is the level of interaction that they're giving the Trump campaign, the Trump side, and his attorneys in this process. It's letting them see everything that was taken, including ordering them to see all the classified information as long as the steps are met. That just doesn't happen.
But Jay, I mean, he had all this classified stuff before. It's not like he's seeing stuff he's never seen before, right?
Well, and one of the things that I gleaned from Judge Cannon's order regarding the stay is, and look, I don't believe that all of the documents that were seized necessarily have been declassified.
Right.
But she has to make a determination as to whether or not maybe they've been declassified by the Biden administration and they're no longer classified. Maybe President Trump has an argument to make about every single document and he waved that magic wand over the boxes and declassified them. And then they become presidential records. And then the Presidential Records Act does give him sort of access to all of those records. We don't know that yet. And I don't think she was digging on the department as much as maybe first glance might be. I think she's just simply saying, we can't just trust all of your sort of summarily concluded, legal arguments here. We have to go step by step and make some determinations about each thing and give President Trump the ability to argue, is this still classified? Why isn't it? And then move on to the next one. Until they do that, we don't have real legal answers to those questions. We can all sort of presume that they're still classified, but we can't just take the Justice Department's word for it.
Yeah, even if they are government documents?
Well, remember, if they're declassified government documents, they're presidential records.
Yeah, but that means that they're supposed then they go back to the archive. They don't belong to the president. Right. So anyway.
He's not going to be able to keep one of them.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
All right. Look, this is interesting stuff. Jay Town and David Maria, thank you so much for joining us on this this breaking news of this ruling that has just come down. We shall see if they appeal. I think they have to at this point, now that they have promised to appeal to the 11th Circuit. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.